You know what, Dog Nation? Every Monday ought to feel this good. Hey, y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And Georgia fans have a lot to be happy about today. That defensive backs coach, our long national nightmare would appear to be over as Georgia has hired Charlton Warren. And the best news about this is it makes Florida mad in the process. It would all seem to be leading to a terrific recruiting weekend for UGA. We'll do our part to cover all of that. And by the way, there was also that weird rumor that popped up over the weekend about James Coley as well. That seems to be kind of going away, maybe a little bit here, but nonetheless, we'll touch on that too. And by the way, wait till you see what one elite 2020 recruit said about the success that Georgia Bulldogs players had in conference championship games yesterday. There's a lot to like about today's program as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If my employer would allow it, and if our, building code would allow it, maybe sitting here in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios today, I would start the program by just kind of puffing on a victory cigar here, feeling very good about myself. I don't mind telling you here on this morning as we begin the program. Georgia has found its defensive backs coach. That's one of those things that sort of hung as like a dark cloud over DawgNation for quite some time. But the fact that Georgia takes Charlton Warren away from Florida, boy, I got to tell you, that brings a smile to my face. There's a tangible benefit here in terms of how it possibly impacts Georgia recruiting. We'll obviously get to the nuts and bolts of all this. But just kind of pause for a moment and reflect on the fact that if you went to a Florida message board this weekend, if you saw some Twitter activity, Florida fans were really, really upset, really, really mad about this. So let's kind of dive in and get into everything that goes on as Charlton Warren becomes defensive backs coach at the University of Georgia. First of all, as I said before, the absence of a defensive backs coach, and we still don't yet know the defensive coordinator. That's obviously going to be hammered out. We have 10 coaches on staff for Georgia now, so it would certainly seem likely that the defensive coordinator is going to come from the staff that's already in place, and a lot of people have their assumptions on that. We've discussed those. I guess we can also get into that with Chip Towers when he joins us here in a moment. But it was the absence of the defensive backs coach, because we knew that was going to be a name more than likely from the outside coming in. A lot of big names have been mentioned there. And the fact that it was starting to take a long time was almost making some Georgia fans very anxious and nervous. We dealt with this on the program. We even, I guess here at DawgNation Daily, had finally gotten to the point where we were also saying, hey, maybe this needs to happen now. But what Kirby Smart ends up doing is he takes the timing of all this, and what it originally looked like a negative, why is it taking so long? The timing all of a sudden now becomes a major part of the positive spin for the story. Announcing Charlton Warren when Georgia did has a chance to have huge reverberations on the recruiting trail, because it just so happens that the weekend in which this announcement's made, one of the guys that Georgia and Florida going head-to-head over here for the remainder of the 2019 cycle, the four-star defensive back Kyer Elam, it just so happens that Elam was also on the Georgia campus. In fact, I think we actually have, for those of you watching on video, a pretty cool piece of video to show. I tweeted over the weekend that this is the best-looking Topgolf location I've ever seen, seeing Elam taking his swing right there in the brand new West end zone. Now, a little bit of a slice there from Elam. Maybe we can get Chris Hack to work on that with him a little bit, the UGA golf coach, once he gets on campus at the University of Georgia. But nonetheless, Elam seems to be enjoying his official visit there, at least based on that video. And announcing Warren when Georgia did, I mean, it just becomes very easy to assume that has to help with Kyer Elam, right? I mean, after all, if you want to go back and look at the backstory of all of this, this has been a very interesting recruitment for Georgia anyway. They have had to go head-to-head with the Gators. To the Florida's credit, they've been a formidable foe here, at least in this recruitment. And as Jeff Sentell explained in the past, Georgia was kind of making up some ground, trying to do that as quickly as it could with Elam, given the fact that he was very close to the Georgia's now departed defensive backs and defensive coordinator, coach, Mel Tucker. Here's what, to kind of sort of explain where we are now and how we got here. Here is what Jeff said in the past in terms of the issue for Georgia, knowing that Elam and Tucker were kind of close. Here's Jeff.
I think Mel Tucker was big for Kyer Elam, especially because he had that NFL experience. His father played 8 and 9 seasons in the NFL. I think this is going to work good for Georgia in terms of Kyer Elam's not going to make his decision until February. He's going to not even take his officials until January. I think that's good because Georgia will need to have that guy in place certainly well in advance.
So it almost didn't, though. So what Jeff's saying now, kind of a while ago was, hey, it's good that Elam's not going to decide until February, because if you're looking at this from the perspective of December, Georgia's got some work to do to show Khair Elam that this is the place he wants to come. This is the program he wants to be a part of. Georgia's going to have to do some work to kind of get that done, because Khair Elam really liked Mel Tucker, and now Mel Tucker's going to be the head coach of Colorado. And Jeff says way back then, hey, it's going to be important for Georgia to have that defensive coordinator in place, or at the very least a defensive backs coach in place, so they can make the impression on Khair Elam they need to make. But as of Friday, when we sat here in the same DawgNation World Headquarters studio, that guy was not in place. There was no defensive backs coach in place at the University of Georgia. And Jeff Sintel, once again, the guy who knows Elam well, knows this entire process well, had told us that that was going to be a problem. If Georgia went through this weekend and didn't announce somebody, there was going to be a little bit of an issue associated with that. In fact, here is what Jeff did say about that.
I think it becomes a big deal if we get to Friday and some official visitors start trickling in where Georgia doesn't have the defensive coordinator settled, and especially maybe the defensive back coach settled. Khair Elam, let's face it, definitely likely the number one remaining target in the to-do list in the class hierarchy for 2019. He's expected to make his official visit to Georgia this weekend. That comes off the heels of the Florida official visit he just took. Florida and Georgia are the alpha contenders for Khair Elam, to say the least.
The reason why I play that audio is because of a specific phrase that Jeff uses in there. He says it's a big deal. Jeff says it would be a big deal if Georgia goes through the weekend and they can't tell Khair Elam, here's who your defensive backs coach is going to be. That would be a big deal for the bad for Georgia. I would suggest, though, and I think most of you probably agree, that it's actually now a flip scenario. It's a big deal, but it's a big deal for the good. You liked Florida. The thing you liked about Florida in large measure was the presence of Charlton Warren. Well, guess what? The thing that you liked about Florida, now we've got that too. The better overall program of the last couple of years, certainly a terrific program to be a part of, and the coach that you liked to Florida, now he's here at the University of Georgia. That's just a good piece of selling on the part of Kirby Smart, and just a terrifically ruthless recruiting move to really stick it to one of Georgia's biggest rivals, or as we think around here at DawgNation Daily, the biggest rival at all. And one of the reasons why this matters so much is because of the potential value that Elam could have to this class. It's not just fun to beat Florida for a recruit, if that's indeed what Georgia's going to do here. In the case of Elam, it's also a really important addition, because y'all will know I have been a little bit of a runaway train, kind of a broken record, whatever mixed metaphor you want to use, talking about wide receivers and my desire to see Georgia add a truly elite wide receiver to kind of pair with Dominic Blaylock for the class of 2019 to really upgrade that position for Georgia. I've made that case over and over and over again. But on Wednesday's edition of Before the Hedges, where we talk recruiting every Wednesday afternoon, Jeff pushed the pause button on me saying that and said, come on now, BA. As much as you may talk about wide receivers, it's actually a strong case to be made that it's Elam that Georgia needs more than any other player could still add here with its remaining spots for the 2019 class. That's another reason why Warren matters so much. In fact, here's what Jeff said about that.
I would say, to me, in terms of Georgia needs, I still think to go head-to-head with Bama and neutralize Alabama's greatest strength on that certain Saturday, on the first Saturday in December, I still think the number one guy there is Khair Elam.
So maybe indeed by hiring Charlton Warren, Georgia's going to really get Khair Elam's attention in a big way. Maybe Georgia can add him as a member of this 2019 class, and filling the need that Jeff Sintel right there just said that Georgia needs more than anything else. But it's not just Elam as a recruit who's paying very close attention to this. Take a look at another guy who we've talked about in this program and who, certainly there's sort of mixed opinions of how interested Nick Cross, the four-star defensive back, was in Georgia maybe before the Charlton Warren announcement. I guess there's also some debate of, given the limited number of spots that Georgia still has, would there be room for Cross in this 2019 class? But that's sort of like to be determined at a later day. You love seeing Nick Cross tweet what he tweeted, though, over the weekend on the heels of the Charlton Warren announcement. Coach Kirby Smart obviously put that out there on his Twitter account. That's how most of the world found out about it. And Nick Cross just sort of gives you 4 straight eyeball emojis saying, I'm looking at this, I'm paying close attention to that, and you want guys like Nick Cross to have their eyes on the University of Georgia. In this case, that's exactly what's going on. I'd also add to this the 2020 defensive back, Fred Davis, an incredible-looking prospect from Trinity Christian, a terrific program right there in the Jacksonville area. This is a guy who was also paying close attention to this as well. I think we have the Fred Davis. He says, whoa. He's got his hand over his mouth emoji. He's got eyeballs as well. You want guys like Fred Davis stopped in their tracks on news like this. So Georgia making a monumental impact on the recruiting trail by adding Charlton Warren. Probably impacting Kaiir Elam. Definitely you see a big reaction from guys like Nick Cross and Fred Davis. It goes back to a word that we've heard a lot of Georgia fans use from time to time. The notion of a splash hire, the notion of, hey, let's see Georgia go out and do something that sort of generates a lot of ripples and a lot of attention. I think stealing Charlton Warren away from Florida certainly is an example of that. And there's a lot to like about Warren here individually. I want to make sure we spend plenty of time kind of, acquainting Georgia fans with who he is. This is a guy that's got a multifaceted background. I think there are really two ways to recruit, and I think that both of them can be potentially effective. You can recruit the players or you can recruit the parents. And in the case of Charlton Warren, he seems like one of those guys that's going to be really good for recruiting parents. He's going to be one of those guys that really gets the attention of parents. They're going to like a lot about him. This guy that went to the Air Force Academy, got a deep, rich military background, got a little bit of a business background as well. In fact, let me let you hear Charlton Warren on this. Now, this is from when he was hired at the University of Florida, kind of going into some of the details of his biography. The audio quality on this is, I'll admit, not great, but I do want you to hear him in his own words, talking about the path that led him to coaching. Now, picture yourself being the parent of a 17 or 18-year-old defensive back who has a chance to work with Warren here at the University of Georgia. There's a lot about his background a lot of these parents are going to really like. Here's Charlton Warren.
Out of high school, I attended United States Air Force Academy. Played DB out there. After graduation, I was commissioned as an officer in the Air Force. I served for 10 years, became a major on active duty. I was an avionics guy, which means for the first part of my career I helped redesign cockpits, fighter jets, and cargo planes. I was an engineer and a business guy. I got a master's in business as well. After that, I got a chance to come down to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and I was a weapons guy. I got to do some great programs there with drones, putting a GBU-38 on B-2s, F-18s, F-16s. That was right after 9/11, so the ops tempo was great and high. Tremendous program, got to do a lot of cool things with blowing things up and getting after bad guys. So I did that, and then toward the tail end I got to go back to the Air Force Academy as an instructor, and that's really where I got into coaching.
So this guy's built fighter jet cockpits, got an MBA, a business degree, blown up some bad guys. I mean, there is a lot about this guy that I think you're going to really like if you're the parent of a future defensive back. And I think there's a lot to be excited about for its immediate impact on Georgia recruiting. But just to have a guy like that around the program, I think it's going to fit really well for Georgia as well. Now, for the Florida side of this, we'll admit here that we're not too big or proud to say that we like the spiteful nature of this, taking a coach that Florida really liked. I thought it was kind of funny on Twitter over the weekend to see Trey Dean, one-time elite recruit in the class of 2018. He was apparently upset about the Warren departure here. He tweets out, okay, he says, LOL, okay, just don't coach the best corners in the country. So Trey Dean unhappy about that. His buddy there in the Florida secondary, Marco Wilson, essentially replicated the same tweet. So clearly they've been talking about that a little bit. The Florida defensive backs not liking this, but apparently trying to pretend to be disaffected by the whole thing. Florida fans, though, they were not like that at all. You know, essentially every tweet I tweeted on Saturday about this, I was obviously really happy about it. You had legions of Florida fans responding to that. I had so many Florida fans trying to make contact with me on Saturday, you would have thought I was a payday lender. I mean, you just had so much negative stuff coming from the Florida side of this over the weekend. But the bottom line is, I mean, you know, that's what rivalries are supposed to be. You're supposed to do things to make your rival mad. You're supposed to do things to make them, you know, really know that you're there. It's just the nature of competition. And Georgia's done that, and it's also nice to see a coach like Kirby Smart pulling out all stops in the recruiting process. It's been a long ride for Georgia to find this final member of its 2019 coaching staff, and maybe not every twist and turn worked out exactly as UGA had it planned, but the final destination, that certainly seems to be a pretty good spot for UGA here. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're glad to have you with us. We go a little long there on the Charlton Warren talk, but there was a lot to get to on that, so I wanted to make sure we did. Let me just say hello to you, and thanks for being with us today. No matter how you get to us on the program, we are actually preempted on radio today. We'll be back tomorrow at noon there on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, but live on video, podcast later on. We're all here for you and glad to have you with us. We're also going to get Chip Towers here coming up in just a couple of minutes as well. Before we do that, let me tell you about a couple of things here. First of all, excited, thrilled about being back at the Marlowe's Tavern again, not this week, but the following week, next week. And I tell you what, for the first time, Dog Nation going to be live at the Marlowe's Tavern in Kennesaw. It's next Tuesday night. Cannot wait for this. Our first time being at the Kennesaw location of Marlowe's Tavern. Let me give the official particulars on this. It's 745 Chastain Road. That's the address in Kennesaw from 6 to 8 p.m. next week. Marlowe's in Kennesaw there for our Countdown to Signing Day event. As Dog Nation gets ready for National Signing Day in February, a chance for you to find out about everything going on there with the final details of that class, what really happened with guys like Kyrie Lum on their official visit. Jeff Sintel, always really great about giving that to you. And next Tuesday from the Marlowe's in Kennesaw, that's exactly the way that it's going to go down. So we'd love to have you circle that date on your calendar and be with us next week. Before we get Chip Towers, let me also spend a moment here as we go around the doghouse here on this Monday, presented by Pella Window and Door. I'm like a lot of you. I was watching the conference championship games yesterday. Thrilling NFC, AFC championship game. They both go into overtime. I guess one of the things that makes me a little different than the average football viewer, though, a lot of my vantage point for watching these games is how is this going to impact Georgia's 2020 recruiting class? Because I'll admit, when you see Todd Gurley earn his way there as a member of the LA Rams, when you see Sony Michel earn his way in there as a member of the New England Patriots, it really does fully establish and cement Georgia's place as what we like to think of as RBU, running back university. And it was great to see a recruit notice that as well. Kendall Milton, a name that we've talked about, one of the top backs for the class of 2020 in a year that is deep with really terrific running backs. Milton may be among the best. You know, different people are going to favor different guys, whether it be Evans or DeMarcus Bowman or whomever. There's a lot I personally like about Kendall Milton. I think he's a really impressive figure. And I'd love to see him come to Georgia next year. And I love what he tweeted yesterday. In fact, he was very quick to notice, as quick as anyone, the presence of these Georgia running backs in the Super Bowl, as both the Rams and the Patriots win yesterday. I think we've got the Kendall Milton tweet. He says, 2 UGA running backs, both in the Super Bowl? Sheesh, he says. Listen, that's exactly the kind of reaction you want a guy like Kendall Milton having on a day like yesterday. 2 great football games actually worked out pretty well for the University of Georgia there in that regard. And, oh, yeah, by the way, one more thing to mention. I know there was the controversy in the NFC Championship game between the Rams and Saints. We're not really an NFL show, so it's not really our place, I guess, to debate the merit of the non-pass interference call. But it was kind of funny to see the great former Georgia running back Todd Gurley having some fun with this when it was all over. The kind of classic scene that you normally see where 2 players trade jerseys at the end of the game to show their respect for each other. Gurley on his Instagram account puts out the picture of him trading jerseys with the referee here. Now this is a mocked up photo, a kind of a Photoshop deal. But Gurley does put this out on Instagram here, and it's really funny of Gurley holding the ref's jersey, the ref holding the Gurley jersey as a way of saying, hey, maybe we got a little help from the officiating here, so I don't mind Todd Gurley having some fun with that. And that's a great way to close out around the doghouse here. Presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Now, one of the great things about Pella Window and Door is this is a nationally owned company, so you get that strength. But it's also locally owned, the branch right here in Georgia, which means you get that great local service as well. They're also going to give you a great offer right now. You can get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 60 months. Now, that offer is valid through February 7th, so you're going to go right now. You know, Pella also offers the best lifetime warranty. It's top-of-the-line equipment. It's unparalleled expertise, and it's a great offer right now. 0% APR for 60 months. So to schedule your free in-home consultation, there are a couple ways to do this. You can go to the website, which is pellasoutheast.us. That's pellasoutheast.us, or give them a call at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979, and have one of their expert folks come out and look at your house and talk to you about how you can make that look even better with our friends from Pella Window and Door. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best. All right, we have got a lot to do on our program. More on the Charlton Warren stuff from a guy that's covered a lot of these things for the University of Georgia over the years here on this edition of DawgNation Daily. Let's get ready to talk to Chip Towers right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Chip Towers here on DawgNation Daily. Great to have his expertise in the program today. Chip, I know we've kind of all been waited with bated breath to find out how Georgia's going to finish out its coaching staff. Now, no defensive coordinator from this group has been named yet, but it does have 10 coaches in place now as Charlton Warren was added. I think it's a big deal to go out and take this guy from Florida. I think when you look at the background here of military man, kind of a no-nonsense approach seemingly. Mike Griffith tweeted out some, or I should say, posted some video of him on the coaching field from back at his time at the University of North Carolina at DawgNation.com this weekend. Seems like there's a lot to like about the way in which Kirby gets this done and Warren himself. What's your reaction to Georgia adding Charlton Warren as defensive backs coach?
Well, this was I'm like everybody else, BA. I mean, this was a home run hire. Not just it appears the quality of individual and coach you got, but the timing was pretty cool too, and it really is neat. And I got to be honest, I'm like, most people, I mean, I didn't know that much about Charlton Warren until, really he came on Georgia's radar screen. As you know, a week before this announcement, there were reports that he had interviewed. As it turned out, he had not interviewed at that point, but obviously he's interviewed since, right? Yeah. And Charlton Warren is a very impressive individual. Now, he's been moving around pretty quick here lately, from from North Carolina to Tennessee to Florida, now to Georgia. But before that, anytime you're hiring somebody, who wins the Mr. Intensity Award at a military academy, you got to feel pretty good about things. And I think something that probably hasn't been underscored enough through the whole family, he's an Atlanta guy, right? Yeah. He's a hometown boy, and coming back home, and I think that bodes well for Georgia. I certainly think between his age, that being commiserate to Kirby's age, I think he was looking, and one of the reasons this might have taken a while, I think he was looking for a long-haul hire, and this guy seems to check all those boxes, not the least of which being the possible immediate recruiting effect with Kaiir Elam. And
you talk about, beyond that, too, the long-haul hire. He has moved around a lot, but in the case of the Tennessee situation, that's obviously a coaching staff that I guess, going to be let go after the 2016 season. You're there at Florida for the 2017 season. But, Chip, you can go back and look at the press conference that Warren did when he was hired there at Florida. I mean, he admitted right off the top there that he had never, really met Todd Grantham, did not know him, did not know Dan Mullen personally. So in terms of being able to establish a long-term relationship at Florida, this was a situation where they brought him in because they thought he was a good coach. He did not necessarily have those relationships in place with those Florida coaches, which may be part of what explains, him leaving as quickly as he did. Not that he didn't like, Grantham or Mullen. I'd never assume that, but he just didn't have a whole lot of personal bonds with them, which maybe made it a little bit easier for Georgia to slide in and make him an offer that he couldn't refuse.
Yeah, maybe so. And as you alluded to at the outset there, we don't know. So we have 10 coaches now. We don't know exactly how they're all going to fall in terms of responsibilities and titles and that kind of thing. And I'm not 100% sure at this point that Warren doesn't end up with a defensive coordinator title or a co-defensive coordinator title. I mean, you never know. Anytime you're moving basically laterally from one SEC position to another, especially rivals, a lot of times there's something else dangling out there, to get you there. There's always money and opportunity, but titles are there as well. And I think it appears to me that it's very similar to what Kirby was working with on the offensive side of the ball. Is he had a guy in James Coley that was going to be part of the title, was going to be part of the leadership on offense, no matter who you brought in, and that was going to be part and parcel of the interview process and who you were talking to and whether they would take the job or not. And I think it's the same thing on the defensive side. I still think Dan Lanning probably got some assurances, some promises made to keep him away from Colorado to start with. So I think he's part of the equation. Whether Glenn Schumann and or Charlton Warren will also be part of the equation, I think we'll find out going forward. But in any case, it's a really good hire, great-looking staff. Insofar as I can tell, I don't know how much of the Kirby Smart defensive language that Charlton Warren speaks just yet. I always thought that was going to be part of this hire. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit out of the box in that regard. But Kirby, you know how much of a handprint he has on the defense and the daily operation. So he'll mold these guys into whatever he needs them to be. I'm sure of that.
This may not matter all that much, but it's, I guess, a curious point nonetheless. Do you think this was the plan all along? Because there were obviously suggestions about the possibility of a guy like Derek Ansley getting involved, and that at least publicly didn't really materialize into much. We know that Corey Raymond interviewed for this job. Multiple media outlets have kind of reported in on that. Sometimes these interviews are just sort of fact-finding missions. You want to learn as much as you can about the opponents that you might face in the SEC, and sometimes they are for the purpose of potentially leading to a move and employment. Do you think that Kirby was looking to hire a coach like Charlton Warren, someone that was greatly respected and had been at the major college level, or do you think Warren was kind of always his guy?
Well, whether he was always his guy, we'll never know until we get a chance to talk to Kirby about it. I'm not sure he'd be honest with us at that point anyway. But what we do know is he said from the beginning, actually, a lot of this came out of Corey Raymond's camp. That's where you could, you heard more information than anything else, was that they were waiting until they spoke to everybody, waiting to the end of the process, and which makes sense. I mean, Kirby said this at the beginning, and at the interim while we were at the Sugar Bowl, that he was not going to be in a hurry. This was not going to be a fast hire. This was going to be a deliberate process. And so, it'll be interesting to find out what we can, when we can, as to who all they talked to. Was Derek Ansley, did he ever come in? Charlton Warren was obviously part of the situation. We know Corey Raymond came. If you just list those three guys, 1, 2, 3, wow, that's a pretty impressive list. That's a pretty impressive pedigree of defensive backs coach that you were talking to, and there's no telling. One of the things that we forget about when these positions come open, Georgia, Kirby Smart, Greg McGarity's office, they get flooded with hundreds of resumes, because everybody in the world wants a job like this, and so you got to vet that whole process. You got to look and make sure that the second coming of Vince Lombardi didn't decide that he wanted to show up on your doorstep. So I think it was just a slow and deliberate process. And again, at the end of it, I think he did a really good job, and it's quite an impressive addition to Georgia's staff.
Before we talk about a different subject, let me circle back and kind of restate something that I think you said earlier, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page about this. It is your belief, I'm guessing, that the overwhelming likelihood is that Dan Lanning gets at least some portion of control as defensive coordinator. He may be the full-on DC, but he's at least going to be a partial DC. Then it's a matter of, does he have it by himself, or does Charlton Warren or possibly Glenn Schumann join him in kind of a co-defensive coordinator role? But in some form or fashion, given the fact that Lanning probably had the opportunity to go to a place like Colorado and maybe work with Mel Tucker, that may have earned him some kind of promotion here at Georgia, and it's beyond that of how much control does he actually get over the defense. Is that your belief? If it is, I want to make sure that everybody knows your thoughts on that before we move on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely my belief, and that's based on two things, basically. There's a little bit of word on the street kind of stuff, but there's also it came time to Sugar Bowl to have the defensive coordinator's press conference, and it was Dan Lanning that was up there. I'm not reading too much into that, I don't think, but just the fact that he was the spokesman for the defense in that situation. And the second one is, based on media in Colorado, that defensive coordinator's position was offered to Dan Lanning. Thirdly, we've seen Kirby do this before. It was the same situation with James Coley, getting the opportunity to be offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Texas A&M, and when you're important to Kirby Smart's staff, he lets you know. He takes care of you, and that's what he did in the case of James Coley. Now we still have to find out how good a move that is. We'll find out. We don't know, but I certainly understand it, and I think it's paid dividends on the recruiting trail. And I think it's the same thing here with Dan Lanning. This is But bottom line, and you and Jeff know this, B.A., this is a strong recruiting staff.
Oh, yeah.
It stays so with Charlton Warren, joining the staff. Dan Lanning has that same type of reputation. And I think that's what I think is going to happen. I think Dan Lanning's going to get a piece of the the title. Whether another piece goes to Charlton Warren or Glenn Schumann, we'll find out. But, he's obviously waiting. Probably, I would think, Kirby waits until after National Signing Day to let all that be public. He likes to announce things all at once, and I imagine he'll do it right around then.
So to change the subject here to the other side of the ball for a moment, you mentioned James Coley. I want to talk to you about him. There's this weird thing over the weekend, and this had been out there for a couple of days before this. Ian Rappaport, the well-respected longtime NFL reporter, had mentioned the possibility of James Coley being in the mix for the Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator job. Now, it seems like now maybe, I guess, Kellen Moore, and the funny thing about this is, if you told me before Friday that he was still quarterback at Boise State, there's a chance I might have believed you. But nonetheless, Kellen Moore may now be moving into that spot, and so maybe this James Coley thing may not actually materialize into much of an actual substantial rumor here. Chip, I'm sure you were the same way. I heard from a lot of Georgia fans who were like, I'm not so sure how many more trips around the rumor mill I can take this offseason. Let's go ahead and get this coaching staff established. Yeah. Let's let this be all done. In a roundabout way, though, and I promise I'm leading to a question here in a moment, but in a roundabout way, I actually think to hear Coley's name mentioned for an NFL opening like this actually benefits Georgia as long as he doesn't take the job, because I do think that Coley's a fast-rising, up-and-coming coach. I do think Georgia will be aided by an increased profile for him. And rumors like this, as long as he doesn't take the job, they sort of benefit Georgia, don't they?
They do. And I'll answer that in a myriad of ways. Starting with, first off, I have great respect for Ian Rappaport. We're good friends going all the way back to his Mississippi days as a Mississippi State beat writer, kind of off the subject a little bit. But sure. Ian Rappaport, if you know him, he's New York as you get. And there he was living as a single beat writer in Starkville, Mississippi, which was a terrific thing. He's a great reporter and does a really good job. That's number one. Number two, you think, recruiting and college coaching is a rumor mill. Man, you get to the pro ranks, that's a sewing circle. I'm telling you.
Sure.
I mean, it's, names come up, they pop up, people talk about them all the time. Third, I agree with what you say, and I think it's good anytime one of your coaches it gets mentioned as a possible NFL coach. And there is, as we know, a trend on the NFL level of those offenses going to a little bit more spread. There's much less differential now between college coaches and pro coaches in terms of what they get paid. In fact, the primary attraction right now of being a pro coach is not having to recruit. Now, you still work 80 hours and 100 hours a week, certainly in the football season, but they get a little bit more of an off season than college coaches do, and that's the attraction of it. But no, I don't think everything. I've watched that from afar. Now we got to keep in mind here. I've been moving the last 4 days, and it's been interesting because I haven't had full internet. With the LTE nowadays, you can always get it, but I haven't even been able to get my TVs hooked up yet. So we got the NFC and AFC championship games going on. I'm keeping up those with Twitter.
Wow.
I'm keeping up with the stuff on the coach stuff. And when you first called, I was going to say, hey, did anything happen this weekend to you? Well, of course it did, because it never stops.
That's exactly
it just never
right.
stops. Yeah, I think it's a good hire, and I think James Coley is going to be here for the foreseeable future for Georgia.
Well, I did have internet this weekend and did have full access to TV, but I will admit one of the things that I did not watch was the Shrine Bowl, but it does go down, and I did see where Terry Godwin won the game's MVP. I guess he had 2 touchdowns in the game, and I was really happy to see that, Chip. And listen, I don't think it's any well-kept secret that the Godwin camp wasn't super thrilled with the way that maybe Terry was always used this season at Georgia. He had gone from being the Dog's second leading receiver the last 3 years to only being the number 5 receiver, at least in terms of total yards, here this year. I know they felt a lot of pressure, I'm sure, because they'd love to see Terry go on to the NFL. And when you're not getting a lot of touches during a game, maybe that leads you to a little anxiety there. But nice to see him show up in the All-Star game. I'd love to see Terry find a home in the NFL, and maybe something like this is a springboard for good work and personal workouts, UGA's Pro Day, the Combine, whatever else. And it would not surprise me if Terry Godwin could somehow find a home in the NFL, because he is certainly athletic enough to do that.
No, I absolutely expect him to, and that was great to see, and that certainly had to help his stock. There's no question. He actually had 4 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Shrine Bowl. And, you know, I tend to agree with the Godwin family. I thought he was underutilized. Now, you got to keep in mind there were 2 things going on with Georgia's wide receiver corps. Number one, he was injured early in the year, and that really set him back. I mean, he was injured at the worst time. He was kind of injured all summer, but then he aggravated his injury in camp. He kind of misses a lot of camp, you know, and then so the second part of the equation, you know, and I know you're, you know, a chief, what do I want to say, you know, a proponent of improvement among the wide receiver corps, certainly from an elite standpoint, but there is no lack of numbers and viable options and pretty good players, you know. And I think Terry Godwin just kind of got forgotten in the rotation a little bit because he missed all those early games. Clearly, he's healthy now. The kid's got a great legacy at Georgia. He should. I mean, Georgia fans should embrace this young man. He came to Georgia as a 5-star. He had an opportunity to play baseball. He didn't. He'll forever be remembered for that great catch against Notre Dame. And he was, listen, man, I mean, he may, I don't know all the stats, but, you know, in terms of targeting QBR, I know he graduated as one of the best Georgia's ever had, which means that whenever a ball was thrown to him, he usually caught it, and he usually did something good with it. Now, he had a big miss there toward the end of the season, I remember, but, I mean, I just think he was rusty much of the time and just never did get back in the rotation when you had so many players that you're trying to get down in and out of there. Him and Nicole Hardman, you know, did a lot of the same things, and Hardman's obviously a terrific athlete and one of the fastest players on the team. Always reminded me just a little bit, don't want to inflate this too much, always reminded me a little bit of Hines Ward from the standpoint of it's multi-skilled, not the fastest guy in the world, not the biggest guy in the world, but you touched on it when you said athletic. The kid can do anything. He can juggle, he can catch the ball, he can play basketball, he can dunk the basketball, he can hit a curveball, he can hit left-handed, right-handed, field it, I mean, pitch. This guy's a really good athlete, and last time I checked, those guys tend to translate to the professional level.
All right, Chip, I know I've kept you long, and I apologize for that. I do want to squeeze in one final question before we let you go, though. You know, you've made weekly appearances on this show going back to 2015, and every offseason we end up talking about the same thing, the possibility that Georgia, Florida may one day leave Jacksonville. And every single year you say the same thing. This always comes up, and it's not going anywhere. The game's going to remain in Jacksonville. And I've always, Chip, tended to agree with you on that. I got to tell you, though, I'm starting to feel like the winds of change may be blowing just a little bit. Now, listen, a lot of these things bubble up and end up not actually happening. But I know that there was a report at DawgNation linking back to, I guess, was a GatorSports.com report on what Scott Strickland had said. I think some of the things that Kirby Smart has said about this in the past. Chip, I'm starting to feel, and different people can debate if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I guess that's not my point right now. But my point is this off-season's worth of Georgia-Florida talk, the conversation on this, maybe one day leaving Jacksonville, feels a little more tangible than some of these have in the past. How do you respond to that?
Well, I agree with the first part you said especially. You said the winds of change are blowing. I actually think they're howling, Brandon. I think behind the scenes that they're really blowing hard, and I think there's some giant dominoes out of there to fall, and this all has to do with the playoffs. It has to do with how college football's national championship is set up, and then how that translates to Power 5 conferences, and there's a lot of things that kind of fall in there. You know, some of those may include a 9-game conference schedule. Some of those things may include, you know, Auburn moving through the Eastern Division. Some of those may include going, you know, home and home on the Georgia-Florida rivalry because of all the complications that causes you with your home scheduling. So, you know, it's always a possibility. Now, I still remain in the camp, you know, well over the 50-50 line. I don't want to say well over 50-50. But they always use this. The ADs always say this. They're always going to say, never say never. We would consider that. Because they're always in a constant state of negotiation with the city of Jacksonville in that contract. That's why they keep it short. That's why they keep it 4 years. And, 2 years out of a 4-year contract, you're having to renegotiate the contract. So that means every 2 years, this is going to be blowing hard, this particular rumor. But, yeah, I agree. With every passing year and every change in college football, I mean, I'm beginning to believe that anything's on the table. 9-game conference schedules, reshuffling of conferences, 5 power conferences with 16 teams in them, leaving the rest of the NCAA. All of that is on the table, and certainly an 8-team playoff, which is where I fall in my belief that I think is what needs to be done to make it a little bit more fair and equitable for everybody involved. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and I think in the next 2 to 5 years we're going to see some profound seismic shift change in college football.
Chip, really good stuff. Thanks for being here with us today. I love your insight on Charlton Warren, and we appreciate you sharing just your opinions on everything going on with Georgia football right now. We'll look forward to reading some from you here at DawgNation.com coming up in the days ahead, and, of course, back here in the program again very soon as well.
Okay. Thanks, BS.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I think it's really interesting to hear Chip use the word howling as what the winds of change are right now, because, like I said, we talk about this kind of stuff every offseason because someone's going to bring it up. To hear Chip say, you know what, I'm starting to evolve on my opinion a little bit of this being something that one day could be different, that's an example of how, this does seem to be kind of a ever-evolving story here. I think the big deal for me is the reason why I think it's a possibility that Georgia, Florida could leave Jacksonville is because I think that's what Kirby Smart wants. I think that's his desire. Chip touched on a lot of reasons why this could benefit scheduling. Georgia needs a better home schedule in its, I guess it would be even-numbered years. So playing Florida at home in, like, say, 2022, 2024, things like that, would certainly benefit the overall scheduling balance for Georgia. But it's also a chance to host recruits in your stadium. There's no NCAA rule that prohibits it from being done in Jacksonville. Georgia and Florida just agreed not to. But really, you don't gain a whole lot from hosting recruits in Jacksonville anyway. You want to host them in your stadium. And I think that's why this matters to Kirby Smart. Now, I thought it was very interesting. Our buddy Michael Carvel, one of our producers here for our program, wrote about this at DawgNation.com over the weekend. I looked at the comment section on that this morning before the show started. There were dozens and dozens of comments in there from people weighing in on this. And it's really funny how, people feel passionately about this. And I've always been of the belief this was a tradition worth protecting. You give me the choice of, keeping this thing in Jacksonville. If it's one person, one vote, my box would be checked, hand in the air, to keep the game in Jacksonville. But, I can certainly be swayed if this is something that Kirby Smart feels strongly about, and if he ever really did go on the record about it, I would imagine there would be a lot of Georgia fans who would be, their opinions greatly impacted on this. More on that story, I'm sure, in the months to come. Let me do the SEC through here for a moment and remind you, by the way, our friends at Kroger, they got an exciting time coming up here. We do our show from DawgNation World Headquarters here in Atlanta every single day, and by the way, it's a great time to be in Atlanta because the big game is coming. And Kroger's ready to help you get stocked up on all the things that you need to throw the best party. After all, it's one of the great things from your neighborhood probably each and every year, that big party for the big game. Well, Kroger's got you well taken care of. So you can go head-to-head with flavor on game day greats, including fresh ground beef, baby back ribs, snacks, and a whole lot more. So check out your local Kroger for a whole lot more on that. All right, let me do the SEC through here. There are a couple of really interesting stories that I want to get to. One of these is a follow-up from something we talked about on Friday. Charles Kelly, the defensive backs coach, at least one of the defensive backs coaches, and special teams coordinator for Tennessee in 2018, was rumored to be joining Mike Locksley at Maryland. That doesn't happen. And on Friday, we kind of reported this as a little bit of a show of strength by Tennessee for being able to hold on to Kelly. Continuity, we believe, is important. Come to find out, though, the reason why Kelly is not going to Maryland, this has been reported by a couple different places. I saw this from our friends at Bama Online. Actually, I don't know Bama Online, but Bama Online tweets out that Alabama is now expected to hire Charles Kelly. You may say no to Maryland if you're Kelly. You probably don't say no to Alabama. Kelly, who's worked with Jeremy Pruitt here, may be going back now to work with Nick Saban at the University of Alabama. And this brings up a point I think is really interesting to watch. In college football going forward, this is going to be an issue. There is seemingly no shortage of former Saban assistants who can become head coaches. You look around the SEC, around this part of college football, there are just a lot of Saban guys who are head coaches. That pipeline never quite seems to run out. But there is only a limited number of guys who are assistant coaches that can work and coincide and get along with the Saban-style coach. That's always going to be a limited number of guys. So look what you've seen this offseason in the SEC alone. You've seen Jim Chaney leave Georgia, go to Tennessee. Charlton Warren leaving Florida to go to Georgia. Charles Kelly leaving Tennessee to go to Alabama. It's almost like, what professional poker's turned out to be. Just a bunch of people sort of sharing the same pot of money back and forth. You've got the same thing going on with the sort of pool of assistant coaches. There's not enough to go around, so all these programs who are essentially trying to do the things sort of the same way, they're just passing around the same assistants back and forth here, and I think that's only going to become a bigger problem. There is a shortage of elite assistants right now. So for a program like Georgia, what's going to be really important is finding that pipeline that produces the next guy who's good enough to fill those roles. One of the best things that Kirby Smart has done since he's been at Georgia is, he's cultivated a guy like Glenn Schumann. Glenn Schumann, Georgia's inside linebackers coach for this year, possible co-defensive coordinator for next year. That's a guy that wasn't even a coach before Kirby hired him. But he's developed him and he's turned him into, I think a pretty impressive coaching prospect. To a certain extent, the same thing's happened with Trey Scott. Dan Lanning, I think, is kind of the same way. Kirby is not just good at stealing Charlton Warren. He's also good at developing guys who seemingly are going to be like Charlton Warren, which is tenacious recruiters and really good coaches during practice. Developing future stars in coaching is going to be really important going forward because the pool of quality assistants, it's just not there right now for all the Saban-style coaches who are looking for, fire-breathing dragons in the recruiting trail. There just aren't a lot of those guys going on right now. Speaking of that, another coaching move potentially being made here. Once again, we'll go to the state of Alabama where Matt Zenitz from AL.com is reporting that Nick Saban and Alabama are looking to pluck another SEC coach away. Looks like Charles Huff, the respected running backs coach at Mississippi State, could be leaving there to take the same job at the University of Alabama. There is major turnover going on with the Alabama coaching staff right now. It certainly seems that some of this is voluntarily being done by coaches who want out, not working with Nick Saban. In some cases, this is Nick Saban also deciding that some guys aren't a great fit for him. I'm going to re-up what I've said, though, recently. I believe that all of this suggests that Nick Saban is on a short-term path here. I think he's trying to load up and build up and make a strong run. And you can decide for yourself if this is one more big season into his final year in 2019 or a limited number of big seasons before he finally lets it go. This is not a guy right now operating on a 5-year plan, though. This is a guy who's looking at a short-term future, and he's trying to maximize his chance for success in the very near future. Watch that and see if I don't turn out to be right about that. And then one more SEC through story I want to get to, and I know I've kind of gone long here, really, in every segment so far today. That's been kind of the theme of today's show. But this is at least worth, putting in the corner of your mind here for a moment. Joe Burrow, the LSU quarterback, was spotted at the NFC Championship game in New Orleans yesterday. And for those of you watching on video, I think we got a photo we can show of this here. Brooks Cabina tweets this out. Hillary Sheenick, I guess, is the original photo, too. Joe Burrow, and you can look at that and see that on your screen there, is walking on the field, and he's in a sling. Now, Cabina, the reporter here, says he spoke with an LSU official, and they say the sling isn't anything serious, but Burrow is in a sling right now. The thing to remember about that is, around the same time a year ago, you saw Jarrett Stidham, the Auburn quarterback, also walking around in a sling, and we didn't see a lot from Stidham during spring practice. Now, once the season got here, Jarrett Stidham also wasn't very good. Now, that's a lot of extrapolation to say that one thing led to the other, but it's at least worth keeping in your mind here that the presence of an injury, even one that was thought to be minor for Stidham a year ago, turned out to be a part of a story where Stidham kind of underwhelmed in his final season at Auburn. So at least, sort of tuck that in the corner of your mind. In all likelihood, Burrow wearing a sling probably doesn't lead any big news, but this may be one worth monitoring in spring practice here a little bit as he tries to develop a little bit better rhythm with the pretty talented crop of wide receivers that they have there at LSU. All right, let's wrap things up here on this Monday. And first of all, for those of you who are enjoying a day out today in honor of the MLK holiday, certainly thanks for spending that time with us. And what a great thrill it is and pleasure and honor, really, to be in the city of Atlanta, the city, that Dr. King made famous all those years ago. Obviously, the great heritage that comes to mind is certainly top of mind here in the city of Atlanta. And so hope all of you are enjoying this weekend and that day off, for those of you lucky enough to be able to have that. As far as the football thing goes, there are certainly days where it's a lot of fun to be able to give the Gator Hater update and remind those lousy, stinking Gators how long things have been. And today is another day to be able to do that. Charlton Warren's on the good guy side now, and he knows it's been 814 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten Georgia. It's our Gator Hater updater right here on DawgNation Daily. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. And on video, we got some time for some comments. We'll probably get off the air close to on time here today, just given the fact that we want to let our folks get out of here and enjoy a little time today. So we're going to get off the air close to on time today, but we got some time to be able to do some comments here. So we'll kind of roll through and do a few of those right now on both Facebook and YouTube, and we certainly appreciate you being here with us. Hope you enjoyed those games from yesterday. My gosh, two thrilling games. I mean, I was telling Michael and Connor, our producers before the show started, that I'm a huge college football fan, right? I mean, like I'm just obsessed with college football. But when you watch those games yesterday, a guy like Eric Berry, who I've been following his career since he was in high school. Rob Gronkowski, justifiably one of the most famous football players in the world. When you're seeing them late in the game going one-on-one on the sideline like that, Brady delivering the ball perfectly, Tony Romo, the broadcaster, calling the play before it happens. It's hard not to deny that's the game being played at the highest level. And even someone like me, a college football obsessive, boy, I'm really enjoying those two pro football games yesterday. And it was great to see the Georgia guys as involved in it as they were. I'll also say our buddy Connor Riley is a big Patriots fan, and I'm sure he was very happy yesterday. Let me be the first here on air to send some congratulations to Mr. Riley to see your pro team back in the Super Bowl again. About time those Patriots caught a break.
Yeah, it's been real tough sledding for Boston professional sports teams in the last 6 months. I love college football much like you do, but, yesterday is why I just believe the NFL is better than college football. That's, I know what happened in the Saints game, which, just an egregious all-time terrible missed call, not just in football, in any sport ever. But, man, 7 hours of football yesterday, and both games competitive.
Yeah.
Well played, except for that one terrible call.
The officiating's terrible, but the game itself is really pretty crisp. But now, Connor used the word better. I'll never use, a better or worse in the comparison. The game's just so different. And the truth is, growing up, I really don't know what it was or what it is about college football. It's always made me gravitate towards that league more so than the other. I mean, here in Atlanta, I'm actually a child of the 80s, and in the 80s there was the blackout rule. So the Falcons actually weren't on TV a lot when I was a kid. And I would imagine that probably has something to do with me just loving college football as much as I do, is that the hometown NFL team, because of just the most asinine rule you could ever imagine, they weren't on TV. So that probably impacted me there. But even with that, when they were on TV, I still just like college football better. I don't know what it is, but there's no denying that those two games yesterday were really, really well done. Charles Fleming says, how many slots we have left for the 2019 class. I guess the number we're working on around here is, and Connor kind of helped me with this the other day, it's looking like it's either 2 or 3. So if it's Scyther, the tight end, who was there, and I guess he's got a chance to visit Alabama this upcoming weekend. So Georgia's got some competition for him, I think. I believe it's been reported that he's going to visit the University of Alabama. So if you take him, and I know Jeff Sintel wrote about, is it Mark Anthony Richards? Is that the guy's name? The running back. Jeff actually had a pretty interesting report about that at DawgNation.com. I really don't know what to make of that. That's not a player that's really been on my radar too much until right now. He's a very highly rated player. I guess he should have been on my radar, but I really haven't thought too much about him until, he takes the visit. Jeff had some interesting quotes from him about the visit. I'll invite you to check that out. So if you're taking a Mark Anthony Richards, if you're taking a Brett Scyther, you maybe only have one spot left. That's why I said during the regular show that if you're assuming that it's 3 spots and you take a Kaiir Elam, you might not even have room for a Nick Ross. So, obviously a lot of this is going to be best player available type stuff when it comes to Georgia for sure. Ed Pollock says the Super Bowl is going to be on CBS, so you get more of Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. Yeah, I really like that broadcast team. I do. I know not everybody. I know Nantz not everybody's cup of tea, especially on the golf stuff. But I kind of like Nantz. I have to say, I kind of do. I'm probably the demographic they're trying to appeal with him anyway. So I guess that's working. Let me go over to YouTube, get a few of these YouTube comments here too, and make sure we get everybody feeling involved. Like I said, we are going to get off the air close to on time today, just because our studio is a ghost town. I want to try to take good care of our staff, who are certainly working hard for us. Brandon Alvin says, is Tommy Bush still enrolled at UG? As far as I know, he is. Brandon, the most recent reference we have to Bush is some of the complimentary things that Kirby Smart said about him, back during the Sugar Bowl preparation. Certainly it is well documented that Bush is one of those guys that, sort of collectively speaking, our comment sections are really a big believer could have a breakout year for George. And, for the positive on this, I'll point to a guy like J.J. Holloman, who has certainly emerged in his second season in a way that he didn't really give evidence of in his first season. So Holloman shows that anything is possible. I think when it comes to a position like wide receiver, where, Georgia didn't have anybody go north of 600 yards this year, this was a receiving core in which there was room for someone to step up and make some plays. The fact that Bush wasn't doing those things as a freshman, I think, is a suggestion that, expectations ought to be tempered just a bit. I mean, this is a guy from the state of Texas that, I don't know that Texas nor Texas A&M are really in on very much in terms of his recruitment. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But when I look at Tommy Bush, what I look at is a guy who certainly has a possibility of breaking in a big way. But I'm also trying to, temper my expectations for what that might end up being. James Buckner also really happy for David Boss Andrews for getting that Super Bowl. Yeah, listen, every year at the Super Bowl they have what's known as the Super Bowl Media Day. Now, if you're not in media, you don't care about Media Day. I do get that, but it's just a circus. Like, they'll credential virtually anyone to be a part of this, and as you might imagine, for like the superstar guys like Tom Brady or people like that, there's this like huge gaggle that surrounds them and every move they make. For this year's Media Day in Atlanta, that's where the big game is this year. Can you imagine the circle that's going to be around a guy like Boss Andrews? Typically, for most Super Bowl media days, the starting center is probably not getting a lot of media attention. My guess is that Andrews will have no shortage of reporters wanting to talk to him about his meteoric rise as an undrafted player who goes on to become, a starting offensive lineman for the New England Patriots, to say nothing of guys like Gurley and Michelle, who can have been there as well. Dapper Dan says when it comes to Holloman, the second-year breakout, he says that could have happened his freshman season if not for his spring injury. I don't really remember the injury situation for Holloman as much, but you're probably right about that. Dogfather also talking about Matt Landers. And Landers has been one of these guys now for 2 years. It's a little bit like, you remember a couple years ago when South Carolina won the NIT 2 years in a row in basketball? It's like, I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing to have that happen in consecutive seasons. For Landers, he's been kind of like the talk of the scout team now for consecutive years. So that's a wide receiver, a tall guy that really gives Georgia a look. And Landers is a lot like Bush for a lot of fans. They say, I'd love to see that guy doing that on the field for Georgia this season. Georgia Peach also talking about Isaiah Wynn, who did get hurt. Otherwise, he'd be right there in the mix for all this year as well. Eric Rio talking about what Todd Gurley tweeted the other day. Yeah, we actually showed this on the show. He had a really nice comment about how choosing Georgia was the best decision he ever made. I really do think guys like Gurley and Michelle are incredible ambassadors for Georgia. I do think it helps with guys like Kendall Milton and maybe Zachary Evans and players of that ilk. I just think it's incredible. I think they've been terrific ambassadors. And I'm not going to lie to you. I had very mixed emotions watching Sony Michel yesterday, and I've never really felt this way about former Georgia players. It's really hard to let that team go, to let that class go. To see Michel find the end zone, I think twice yesterday, 100 yards, I believe, or right at 100 yards for Michel, which for an NFL game is a pretty good rushing total. I mean, he just shows up in big games. AFC Championship, the Rose Bowl. And there was a certain degree of kind of like melancholy feeling on my part about like, can't believe it's been more than a full year now since Georgia made the run of the college football playoff in 2017. And I believe full-heartedly that Georgia's going to have a lot of success coming up in future years. But that 2017 run's always going to be a really fun, really special thing. And this, the way that Michelle played in that game against Oklahoma is just it's just an all-time great sport memory. And so seeing him yesterday reminded me of, you know what, that's been more of a year ago now. And boy, time gets away from you, and you'd love to sort of freeze that moment and have that team be there forever, but you just can't. You just can't do that. I don't know if you had any of the same feelings. I mean, I guess for you it's a little bit different because he's playing for your team now. But for me, I don't know. It's just a reminder of how much fun that 2017 season was.
Certainly. A couple different things on Michelle. One, this was a guy who was getting just roasted by the Boston Bears at the beginning of the year. Then comes out in the playoffs. First rookie ever to have 5 touchdowns in a postseason. Yeah. First player since another former Dog, Terrell Davis, in 1997 to have 5 touchdowns in a season. Last night, 29 carries. Now, some people have wondered where he sort of went late in the game. I think part of that is, Belichick sort of trusting veterans.
Georgia fans have a little bit of an experience with that, too, in a big game, wondering where Michelle went too late.
Just add, he had 29 carries. His last 2 years at Georgia, he did not have more. He had one game where he had more than 20 carries.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think part of it, too, is just sort of managing the workload.
Yeah.
Maybe he himself had probably gotten a little bit tired.
I did notice the high number of carries, but isn't it kind of ironic, though, Connor, that, the criticism of, hey, where did Michelle go late in this game? That's exactly what Georgia fans were saying last year's national championship game, too.
Yep. I mean, fortunately,
now I think that Nick Chubb
guys won this time. So.
Yeah, I think Chubb gets a little bit of a bad rap for the national championship game a bit, but that was definitely out there. And am I right in saying that's the only first-round running back that Bill Belichick has taken since he's been in New England?
No, he took Lawrence Maroney out of Minnesota, and I want to say 2004 or 5.
Okay.
But Michelle's been much better than Maroney ever.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
He's certainly paid off in a big way for the Patriots.
Mike Mitchum, and if you're my age, I think you have a lot to relate to with this. Mike Mitchum says the 2017 dog season is a lot like the Braves' worst to first season. You can't ever duplicate that feeling. Now, I'm 41, so when the Braves went worst to first in 1991, I was in the 8th grade. Y'all, when you're in the 8th grade, sports is like the only thing you have to worry about. You got no responsibilities. School's not really that stressful. Everybody passes the 8th grade. You can stay up till like 1 in the morning watching these playoff games because what else would you do? That's just all you have to do in life. So you got to understand, like that 91 Brave season for me will always be just an all-time great sports memory. The same way that houses decorate for Christmas. Back in like 1991, houses on the outside were decorated with like Braves tomahawks and things like that. I mean, the entire, I lived in Gainesville, which was, still about an hour north of Atlanta. Even in Gainesville, which was kind of a rural place back then, it's overtaken by Braves hysteria. I mean, the Brave stuff was everywhere. And that season does not end in a World Series. Braves lost in the World Series to the Minnesota Twins that year. But I think for a lot of Braves fans, the 91 runner-up finish, losing the World Series, is a more special season than the 1995 World Championship season just because it was the first time, it was a special team and a lot of fun. I really do think that Mike's right about this. I think the 2017 Georgia team is going to be viewed very much the same way. I legitimately believe, not just saying this because it's what you want to hear, I legitimately believe that math is on Georgia's side. It is eventually going to win a national championship. I don't know that that team will be as remembered as fondly as the 2017 team is just because of it's just hard to replicate the level of affection that Georgia fans had for Michelle and Chubb and Fromm as a freshman and everything else. Certainly the national championship team will be, lionized in 1,000 different ways. But the 2017 team may still be the most popular Georgia team of all time. I think there's a chance that's true. For sure. Len Luhrmann says, is this a Georgia Bulldog show? Any recruiting news? We've been talking recruiting all day long, Len. What you want to know? But we've been talking recruiting the entire time. Alan Verbanchik says he thinks that UG wins it all in 2019. Which I think, listen, I mean, Georgia's going to be no less than preseason number 3. I mean, really no less. I mean, they're probably going to be preseason number 3. I guess there's some debate for, maybe the 4 spot, whatever. And it's ironic that a team like, Ohio State could kind of be in that conversation just a bit. But Georgia's going to be right there, and therefore, I think absolutely right in the thick and the heart of this the entire time. And I think one of the things that's going to really aid Georgia next season is much attention we're going to pay to the offense, right? The possible, emergence of a Zamir White, what Jake Fromm does in his junior season, my issue with the wide receivers and that group really needing to step up and play in a big way. We're going to obsess over the offense, but the thing that actually could lead Georgia to a national championship next season is this may be finally a defense that has all the pieces in place. Now, I know that Jeff Sintel's addressed some skepticism with the defensive line, its ability to stop the run. I'm a big believer that as the interior linebacking core improves, and I think next season that's going to be the case, as the interior linebacking core improves, that's going to make things a little easier in a defensive line that's trying to find some more guys like Jordan Davis, which can be beefy and stop the run up the middle. But I think this next season could be the best defense in the entire sport, and that's going to really, really matter. Let me hear some more stuff here. Let me pop over to YouTube here for a moment. Ninja the Noob says the 2017 team put the dogs in everyone's mind. Yeah, there's no doubt that that's a season and a team that really grew the Georgia's national brand in a big way for sure. James Brown says the 2019 defense is going to be very special, going to be a lot better, could very well be. Mary Clouser seems to be agreeing with that too. Lionel Francis says the 2017 team is no different than the 2002 team. That's a good point. I also really was at a great age to experience Georgia's 2002 SEC championship. Once again, not a lot of responsibilities. I was young, just getting married, didn't have a lot of money, but the money that I did have was almost all discretionary income. Probably wasn't making the wisest financial decisions, but listen, when you're young, you do some dumb stuff. So I would travel to all these games for really that 2001 through about 2004. I went to a lot of Georgia football games, away games included. That was a really fun team. Then 2002, that won the SEC championship. Great point. For sure. Ninja the Noob says, BA, who do you see as breakout players for us in 2019? So we have been talking about this a little bit over the last couple days. We've talked about Charlie Warner as one of those names on offense. Connor, you've written about this on both sides of the ball. I'll invite you to check out the Good Day UGAs. If you don't, that's a great way to kind of keep up with what's going on here on kind of a regular basis. Give us kind of a recap of who you've kind of classified as potential breakout stars on both sides of the ball.
You're going to hate me for this. So last Thursday and Friday, we wrote about surprise players, guys who we think can go on to have bigger roles. As far as a breakout guy, I believe breakout guys are guys who've already been established, guys who've already played a lot, guys we know. So breakout guys on the offensive side of the ball this year, I'm going with Charlie Warner, tight end. I'm going to go Brian Harrion at running back.
I don't think that's a bad name at all.
And
I don't.
Part of it, we've ruled out five-star guys as breakouts, surprises, and whatnot. On the defensive side of the ball, I think you're going to see a guy like Channing Tindall have a breakout year, and I think you're going to see a guy like Malik Herring have a very breakout year.
I think both those names are really good too as well. And Herring may fit the definition of breakout because we saw him, especially late in the season, lots of action with him in backfields. He was really all over the place. Maybe next year's the year where he kind of comes into more of a semi-starring role. I think that's a really interesting answer. So I think those are all really good answers. Somebody in the comment section also mentioned Tyson Campbell. Kelly Burnett mentioning Tyson Campbell. That's another guy that I could see. I don't know if that's is that a surprise or a breakout? That's a breakout, right?
He'd be a breakout.
Because he started a lot of games. Yeah, so there is that. Mookie.
Got a little news here. DeAndre Walker, Georgia outside linebacker, says announced will not be participating in the Senior Bowl this week. He's going to get a second opinion on that groin injury that kept him out of the Texas game.
Yeah.
Forced him to leave the Georgia-Alabama game earlier. Said quite a lot. I think if he is able to stay healthy and finish that game, Georgia beats Alabama.
So in all likelihood, we don't see him working at it all until Georgia's pro day, correct?
I would say the combine, depending on when the combine.
So would a guy like Walker typically do the combine, or would he typically?
He's someone who's going to need to do the combine because his testing numbers are really going to determine where he gets going.
But if there's any risk about the groin situation, he might shut it down and wait because he's a good enough prospect that teams are going to be curious to see what he can do in a pro day if he's fully healthy, right?
I think it's more important to maybe
Okay.
You'll have more eyes on you at the combine.
Okay.
And you can have a chance to shine there more so than.
I think he can be a pro. I just hope he gets drafted high enough or gets the attention of teams so he can really kind of be, a part of that group that has a chance to be a mainstay on a roster. So full health for him is going to be really important. Mookie5232 on YouTube also asked about recruiting. We had somebody ask about this on Facebook a moment ago. So let's kind of give a recap of where we understand and know things based on the last couple of days. Let me start with who was at Georgia this weekend. Jeff wrote about Mark Anthony Richards, the running back being there. He sort of seems to me like a James Cook style running back, kind of small, really fast, a guy that could also potentially line up as a slot receiver. In fact, that's apparently some of what Georgia has talked to him about, but he was on campus. I'll invite you to check out DawgNation.com for some really interesting quotes for a play that's actually rated pretty highly here, so maybe a part of Georgia's considerations. Based on Twitter, it looks like Scyther, the tight end, was indeed at Georgia this weekend. Georgia's got some competition for him as all of a sudden he becomes, for teams that need a tight end like Georgia does, he becomes one of the remaining tight ends on the board. And so, therefore, you're going to have, a lot of folks chasing him down. It seems like Georgia made, I'm assuming, a strong impression here this week. And now we'll kind of see where this goes. That's obviously not as highly rated of a player in terms of this kind of last-minute conversation, but it is a player at a position that Georgia really needs. So watch Scyther, the tight end, there on that. There's obviously the big story with the defensive backs. Kyer Lam to be on campus when Georgia announces Charlton Warren as its defensive backs coach. The presumption we're going to make is that makes a huge impact on Elam for a player that was already strongly considering Georgia. This power move like this would seem to really help Georgia in that situation. We showed the video a little earlier of Elam enjoying his official visit, hitting a golf ball there at Sanford Stadium. That was kind of a cool thing to see. You can check back to the beginning of the show to see more of that if you're watching us on video right now. Nick Cross, another defensive back, a four-star guy, committed to Florida State. He also tweeted about Charlton Warren being here at the University of Georgia. He was seemingly wowed by that. Jeff has said the issue with George and Cross, that's a pretty significant long shot, so maybe don't get your hopes up too much on Cross, even though he had some favorable things to say on social media about Charlton Warren. This may be an issue of, Cross is, I don't know if he sticks with Florida State here or not, but maybe just not UGA bound for this. It does look like, based on some social media activity, that George Pickens was on campus this weekend. Y'all know that I would love to see Georgia get George Pickens. I think that'd be a monster get for the program. At this point in time, though, this is a complicated recruitment both on and off the field. Y'all know that. Many of you are aware of that. There's no shortage of places to go to find out more about that if you want to. So I don't really know what to make of Pickens being here. I guess I'm glad he took the visit. I think the visit ought to be a chance to kind of find out more about the full story about what's going on with him, but also give him a chance to see how he could fit into a Georgia offense that it's losing its top three receivers, at least based on the receiving yards gained in 2018. So, Connor, did I kind of sum up everything that happened this weekend? Did I leave anything out there at that point in time?
No, I think you hit on just about everything out there,
James Brown says Auburn sent their entire offensive staff last week to visit Pickens. Shows how important he is to their class. And, yeah, I mean, at this point in time,
really thought we were going to make it through a show without mentioning George Pickens.
Come on. I mean, this is one of the few big guys on the board here. I think there is a chance that he still flips from Auburn. It's just a matter of if he flips, does he flip to Georgia, or is it more of a place like LSU or Tennessee that seems to be kind of trying to come on strong here a little bit late here as well. Chime Dog says, BA, are Kirby Smart and James Coley likely to toss the ball around more with Fromm this year in order to recruit future top quarterbacks? Chime I certainly hope so. I think that ought to be important for the next 2020 quarterback, but also for wide receivers as well. There's no reason why, when Georgia's got the offensive linemen, got the running backs, this should not be viewed as a place to be for quarterbacks and wide receivers as well. So I hope that's indeed what happens. John Adams says also in terms of the George Pickens pursuit that Georgia sees Pickens every time possible more than a chance. So we will see. And Mookie5232, thanks for weighing in on the program today. Appreciate you getting a good recruiting conversation started here. Let me pop over to Facebook, then after that we are going to get off the air. Let me see if we can get some good stuff here. Nick Lurch says, I would think that Auburn would be all about one of those transfers at quarterback. Yeah, I mean, I guess they tried to get it on the Austin Kendall thing, the Oklahoma transfer. He visits there. I don't think it's become official yet, but I'm of the belief that Kendall's probably going to West Virginia. I mean, now, it's also worth noting that's not the West Virginia of Dana Holgorsen. Holgorsen's now at Houston. That's Neil Brown, the former Troy coach, taking over there. But nonetheless, that's going to be a very wide-open offense, and they're going to be playing against pillow fight defenses. So if you're a quarterback looking to put up big numbers, even with a new coaching staff in place, Morgantown might be a place to be. But, boy, you can be a star at Auburn if you come in there and do the right things. Save the program. I'm going to tell you something. You'd be treated very well there in that regard. But I still have sort of been of the belief that West Virginia is the point spread favorite for Austin Kendall, right?
I believe Oklahoma is no longer blocking them. Gary and Christian Gilsano have a comment that I tend to agree with. He says, BA, I believe we have to win it all next year, or maybe another 3 years of good teams, but not great. It all depends on Fromm's decisions. I don't know about how much it depends on Fromm, but I feel like Georgia's going to win a national championship next year. Has to be the year that it happens.
Okay, so we've talked about this a lot off the air, and at some point in time, I'm going to try to do some research on this, but honestly, I don't really want to. I wish somebody else would just do it for me, and I would just steal it and call it my own. I think it'd be very interesting to look, and we will make this our final conversation for the day. If you look at the period of time, and I've said this before, from the time that Mack Brown won the national championship at Texas to the time that Dabo Swinney won the national championship in Clemson in 2016, if you look at the span of time in between that, every coach that won a national championship for the first time did so in his first 4 years on the job at his new school. That's a pretty long span of time, from 2005 to 2016. That's a decent span of time there. The coaches that were winning national championships were all relatively new coaches to a program. Here's one of the things I want to check out, though. Is the caliber of team that constituted national championship worthy back then as deep and talented as what it seems to be today? My hypothesis, to use a scientific word, is that it's not. Think about some of what we saw during the BCS era. We saw Florida upset Ohio State in 2006. Are those two teams, from a talent standpoint, as measured by recruiting rankings, a little more difficult to do the farther back you get in time because the ratings weren't quite as cemented and well documented as they are now. But is that Ohio State team that was favored in that game? Is that as talented as what the playoff looks like now? The same thing with the Ohio State team that got upset in 2007. Is that as talented as a team as you have in place right now? I think one of the things that would make me believe that even if Georgia doesn't win it in 2019, that things still may be fine and Georgia may still be on kind of a fine trajectory, even though recent history would suggest otherwise, is because the overall nature of what defines a national championship contender now is just a deeper, more talented team than it was in the BCS era. I think you've got a real concentration of resources now, talent, coaching smarts, quarterbacking. That all seems to be gravitating towards a small number of programs. I just think it's harder to win a national championship now than it was in the early playoff era and the BCS era. And so, the fact that Georgia is as close as it is, for me, nothing changes even if Georgia doesn't win one in 2019, which may not be what people want to hear, but I believe may very well be true. We're just in a unique era for college football where Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, I would add Ohio State into that, these four programs, and there may be a revolving fifth one, they just control most of the talent. Therefore, it's hard to knock off a Clemson. It's hard to knock off an Alabama. But over time, as long as Georgia stays in that very elite club, odds are it's eventually going to happen.
Right. I do think at some point Kirby's going to win a title. And, with winning any championships, I mean, you saw with the Patriots last night, you need luck. And you need the ball to bounce your way to sort of win one of these. If D4 is not offsides last night, Patriots, they're going home, going back to New England, not coming to Atlanta. To your point about it being harder, I think there's more, it's easier to get to where Georgia's gotten to nowadays than it was in, 2008, 2007, 2009. But that top peak where you have the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, that top stratosphere, I think it's a little bit harder to beat those teams on a year-to-year basis than maybe having a one-off year.
I would dispute, though, the notion that for Georgia to be where it is among the 3 or 4 best programs, I don't think it's easier to do that. I think the speed with which Kirby Smart has put himself in that group is pretty amazing. Now, Easy Brown says, I want to make this part of our conversation. He says, nope, BA, we're tired of that wait till next year stuff. And he references some of the other Atlanta teams like the Falcons who've been kind of in that same conversation. He says, I'm a sports fan. My teams have been close but no cigar. I'm tired of waiting for next year. I certainly grant that's where the feeling of fans is. I have no doubt that's what the pulse of Dog Nation kind of is right now. But I do think, to go back to what Connor was talking about, the rapid way in which Kirby Smart has kicked in a door and put Georgia in that spot of, really from a talent standpoint, Georgia's indistinguishable from Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, what I think of as the other 3 most talented teams in college football, and really from a composite standpoint, actually more talent than Clemson. I think that leads you to believe that this is not a one-year story for Georgia. This is 2019. This is 2020. Then beyond that, it becomes a little hard to hold on to Sam Pittman because maybe he's getting close to retirement. James Coley maybe wants to be a head coach. I'm not telling you got 10 years to do this, but I do think you've got more than one.
It's a fair point. I would also say, it's hard, for the people who do keep saying, oh, we'll be back. I would just caution against that. In 2016, we saw with the Falcons, all-time great offense, young team, defense was only going to get better. That team doesn't look all that close to winning a title, and that may have been their one best shot. So title chances aren't guaranteed. You have to continue to improve and get better.
And I would also say that also points to some differences in the 2 leagues, too, where like there's a rapid change that seems to occur in the NFL, whereas, because in college you can just lean on your opponent with better players. In the NFL, the margin is so thin. That's one of the things that Georgia has going for it is the fact that it's still going to be, even with a much tougher 2019 schedule, and I saw somebody pointing that out in our comment section earlier, even with a much tougher 2019 schedule, Georgia's still going to be a sizable favorite over virtually every team that it plays, and it's probably not a point spread underdog, even next year with a much tougher schedule. Likely 5 top 25 teams in the preseason on the schedule. Georgia's probably still not a point spread underdog to anyone in the regular season.
Yep.
It'd be a shocking occurrence if Georgia's a point spread underdog to anyone next year.
They're probably not going to be one to A&M.
Yeah.
Almost certainly not to Notre Dame. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now,
maybe Florida.
It'd have to be something pretty significant would have to happen.
Florida would have to go beat LSU pretty handily, beat Miami pretty handily, and go into that game undefeated.
Yeah, you'd have to have something.
And even then,
right?
I'm still not certain
because Vegas is like Georgia more than Florida the last couple of years.
Yeah.
All right, so John Adams will make this the last comment. It comes from YouTube. He says, with all that being said, you still got to strike while the iron is hot. We need that sense of urgency behind next year's team. And, John, I'll agree with you on that. There's certainly a mathematical case to be made that Georgia's going to be hanging around for a few more years. But this notion of, as Easy Brown said earlier, we've waited long enough. Strike while the iron's hot. A sense of urgency about getting it done this season. I think that's a pretty good attitude to have. And the great news here is, to kind of bring this all back full circle to where we started our program today, Kirby Smart's behaving that way right now. Going out and getting Charlton Warren is a strong, bold stroke. It's the kind of thing that's kicking sand in the face of Florida. That's taking its lunch money. And, Kirby Smart knows that he's got an opportunity to do this right now. And if what I said during the SEC through turns out to be true, and this is sort of a short-term future for Nick Saban, how great would it be not just to hang around until he retires, but actually be the one to send him into retirement, much the same way that Georgia did to Steve Spurrier back in 2015. This is a big season for a lot of SEC teams coming up in 2019. And the great news is that Georgia's right there in the middle of it, and as many of you have been saying, also with the final additions to this 2019 class, that maybe makes that all the more true. Y'all enjoy the day today. Certainly best wishes in observance of the MLK holiday. Spend time with family and friends. Thanks for letting DawgNation Daily being a part of it for you. We'll look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live.